Hello, friends. Welcome back to ABN's Trinity channel for another episode of Islam and the News. Today is Friday, April 27th, in the year of our Lord, 2018. And as always, it's a blessing to have you joining me from around the world via satellite and, of course, through high-speed internet and on many, many mobile devices and apps. If you don't have the ABN Set app, please make sure that you download that to your Apple device, your Android device, Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, Apple TV. There's a long list of different platforms that you can actually watch this show live every single week, as well as all of our other weekly shows that we do. And also, if there isn't a live show happening, the digital tree, there are a ton of channels there now, and they have stuff rolling 24/7. So anytime, day or night, that you want to get content that has been live at some point, you can find it there. But of course, you can find all of the live English shows every single week. If you download that app and then click on Trinity Channel specifically, you'll be able to watch the live shows on the go right on your mobile device. Thank you so much for your prayers and for your financial support, which allows all of these shows to continue. We thank you also so much for subscribing to the Trinity Channel's YouTube channel, for your likes, for your comments, and just letting people know about all the different shows. Of course, this one here, Islam and the News, your Islamic news source, bringing you the news headlines, the pictures, the videos, and of course, the commentary that you will not get in the mainstream media. And of course, as always, I have a whole hour's worth of news here for you, so let's go ahead and get right to it. I have here actually from Yahoo, Iran's Khamenei urges Muslim nations to unite against U.S. Yes, it says here out of Ankara, Reuters, Iran's supreme leader calls on Muslim nations to unite against the United States, saying Tehran would never yield to bullying, quote unquote. State television reported on Thursday the Iranian nation has successfully resisted bullying attempts by America and other arrogant powers, and we will continue to resist. All Muslim nations should stand united against America and other enemies, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said. Iran's top authority criticized Trump for saying on Tuesday some countries in the Middle East wouldn't last a week, quote unquote, without U.S. protection. It also says here, quote, such remarks are humiliation for Muslims. Unfortunately, there is a war in our region between Muslim countries. The backward governments of some Muslim countries are fighting with other countries, Khamenei said. Iran and Saudi Arabia have long been locked in a proxy war, competing for regional supremacy from Iraq to Syria and Lebanon to Yemen. And of course, this is definitely an ongoing war. But of course, you, of course, know about something that I talked about last week. And of course, I'll never say, I told you so. All I'll say is you should have listened to me. For anyone out there who is still following, of course, this news headline and the continued news that comes out about the Syrian gas attack, quote unquote, I have here from 21st Century Wire, no attack, no victims, no chemical weapons. Duma witnesses testify to OPCW in The Hague. Now, this has been spreading around so much that a lot of semi-mainstream media outlets have been talking about it a little bit, but they're not really spotlighting it too much, but they're forced to at least mention it because so many people are talking about it. There's a lot of different videos coming out exposing this narrative. It says here on this website, yesterday both Syria and Russia presented witnesses to Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, in the Netherlands. Multiple witnesses and participants in the White Helmets video testified of a staged gas attack in the Syrian town of Duma, as well as how the online video productions supplied to Western governments and media were part of the same provocation, quote unquote, that Moscow had warned about in advance. AP reports that Russia's permanent representative to the OPCW, Alexander Shulgin, described the social media evidence, quote unquote, used by Washington, London, and Paris for the alleged chemical attack as a sloppily staged video shot by a pseudo-humanitarian organization in a bid to touch hearts, quote unquote, adding that the same strategy had been used in previous false flag attacks in Syria. Now, I've mentioned in different Islam in the News episodes in the past these ridiculous white helmets that are completely fake. They're a humanitarian aid facade. This is not the case. Here's just one of the videos that we have now, and you'll notice that there's a young boy here, and he is just fine, and you'll see he's the exact same boy he was, or one of the boys who was in the video. Let's go ahead and play this video now.
لا تخاف حبيبي، خافوا بالزبط.
اجوا ما لقينا غير عمايته برا، يعني نروح على النقطة دغري. رحنا على النقطة ما لقيت غير زلمة تناولني وكبت علي ماي.
أنا كنت عند الملعب البلدي عم بشتغل بالحفر والتنشيم، أنا سجين.
ايوه.
قلت لهم بدي، سمعت عم يقولوا بكرية وما بكرية وهربوا عن النقطة وما عن النقطة، أنا حجان قلت لهم بدي شي ساعة نص ساعة إجازة، قال بتروح وبتجي دغري. رحت فت على الحارة ما لقيت حدا، فتت عادي يعني مرقت وكذا، ما في شيء، بس ما لقيت حدا.
ايه الحارة هربانين من الكيميائي، سمعانين بالكيميائي وهربانين يعني ولا شو؟
ما معي خبر بشيء.
ما معي خبر،
ما معي علم بشيء، اللي معي علم فيه انه ما لقيت حدا. ورحت عم دخن وهذا يعني ما حسيت بشيء. فتت والله على النقطة النفق محدم من ناعون. فتت هيك قلت له لك عم يقولوا بكرية وما بكرية، نحن لبقنا بكرية. احنا من بيت دياب بس لبقنا بكرية، ما حدا بيعرفنا دياب.
فهمت عليك. بكرية.
رحت على النقطة ما شفت مايو عم يشتفوا كذا، شفت عاد اولاد اهلين عمو ابو حسن طلعت لفوق لقيت الام والاولاد. الحمد لله. ليش شو عم تساووا هون؟ قال قاعدين. ليه؟ قالك عيطوا برا انه في ريحه ومدري شو كذا، وهربنا لهون. قلنا له بعدين قال قاعدين، اعطونا تمر وبسكوت للاولاد والحمد لله ما فيهم شيء يعني.
Some people, some weak people, we don't know any one of them come to here and they said chemical attack. Here in the hospital we didn't see any chemical attack symptoms here.
Now, this was just one of the videos. There are even more videos out there showing more in depth. You see this boy taking the reporters who were filming it to the different parts of the hospital that he was taken to. He said, hey, they came up to us. They said, hey, go to the hospital. They went there. Of course, you saw in parts of the video when I played one last week that the kids were screaming. Of course, if you have little kids and you take them into a place, not telling them what's going on, you start spraying them down with water and putting water in their face. Yeah, they're going to be crying. They're going to be screaming. But we see that this boy is just fine. We see this in all the other videos of him talking about what actually happened there. Now, again, as I said a week ago, you know, everyone's going to agree, or most everyone's going to agree, that ISIS needs to be dealt with. But is ISIS actually being defeated by going and doing something in Syria, whether you're bombing Syria or whatever else? More and more of these videos are coming out, and hopefully this gets spread around, because there's a problem here, obviously. And like I said before, we don't need to attack Syria in order to defeat ISIS. Actually, I have here from AMN, Syrian army deploys new, very destructive weapon against ISIS forces in South Damascus. Yes, Syrian army is fighting ISIS. Why don't we join with them and with other countries saying, hey, let's work together to defeat ISIS? And this is exactly what we see happening here on their own. This here says video footage has emerged showing the Syrian army deploying a new, never-before-seen weapon system against the Islamic State forces in southern Damascus. The weapon system in question appears to be a DIY-modified UR-77 explosive line charge thrower mounted on the back of a truck. Its official designation is not known to Al-Masdar News. Rebel forces operating in Daraa province have been seen deploying a very similar weapon system against the Syrian army. Since the beginning of the Syrian conflict, government forces have developed unique artillery systems such as the Gulan series of EROM launchers that greatly increase the firepower available to the brigade-level formations. Now, this is actually a 6-minute video, and we don't want to play the entire thing. We'll play about half of it for you, just so you can see what this device is. But again, this is the Syrian army fighting ISIS. We need to take that add this to the equation here of what needs to be happening over there and what is currently happening over there on their own, using their own military. Let's go ahead and check out the video now.
شو اخبارك؟ الحمد لله على سلامتكم. اخبارك؟ معنويات يوم النصر باذن الله. الله يسلمك يا رب. ابو حلب شو؟ الشهاده والنصر، النصر النصر يا وسيم، النصر يا عمود يا
Now, of course, when you watch these real videos, basically these white helmet videos like Monty Python skits, is ridiculous when you compare the two. And of course, it's not just the Syrian army who's fighting ISIS. Also, Iraq says that its strikes in Syria killed 36 IS militants. So we have Syrian army fighting ISIS. We have Iraq fighting ISIS. I mentioned a week ago 2 or 3 other groups who are fighting ISIS. So that should be the focus here, because again, that is definitely a problem, and ISIS is still losing more and more territory. Of course, there's other stories coming out about them resurging in other areas as well. But of course, we're keeping you up to date here on Islam and the News every single week. I also have here from AP. This is actually in reference to ISIS, and this is something that we've talked about here as well, all their different propaganda literature that goes out, all their very high quality videos that they put out that unfortunately encourage a lot of people to join them and sympathize with them. It says here, Europe, U.S. police seized servers used by IS propaganda sites. This is out of Paris. It says police around Europe and North America have seized servers and data from Islamic State propaganda outlets in a multi-country operation aimed at tracking down radicals and crimping the group's ability to spread its violent message. The two-day operation was the culmination of efforts started in late 2015 after coordinated IS attacks that killed 130 people in Paris, according to a statement from European police agency Europol. Police notably targeted the IS-branded Amok news agency, as well as Al Bayan Radio and Halumu and Nashr news sites. Amok spreads information online in at least 9 languages and has been used to claim IS was behind attacks in multiple countries, from the 2016 nightclub attack in Florida to a deadly supermarket hostage-taking in southern France last month. While Europol said the operation punched a big hole in the capability of ISIS to spread propaganda online and radicalize young people in Europe, quote unquote, it didn't shut down the propaganda altogether. For example, Nashr continued to share IS statements, and Amok reports Friday through channels on encrypted messaging network Telegram. The Islamic State group has used sophisticated and ever-changing communication tools to spread its apocalyptic message to delusional Muslims living in the West, to persuade them to reject Western ideals of pluralism and tolerance. High-quality videos, complete with thrumming beats and a slick editing techniques, have unlimited reach thanks to social media networks. Extremists with gentle American accents narrate radio broadcasts aimed at U.S. internet users. And of course, too, many people from Europe and, of course, Middle Eastern countries as well have gone to join ISIS. And speaking of ISIS, I have here from Daily Mail, it says, American ISIS widow whose son appeared in propaganda videos defends buying Yazidi sex slaves, details beatings in Syria, and claims she dreams of returning to the U.S. to eat McDonald's with her children. As it says here, Sam El Hassani, 32, is in a Kurdish prison in Syria with her 4 young children. Her ISIS-fighting husband, Musa El-Hassani, died last year in a drone strike. Sam, who is American, said she is desperate to get our children back to the U.S. She said in a prison interview with CNN that she was tricked into going to Syria by her husband in 2015. And also, she's a mother of 4, and it claims she was beaten, raped, and tortured living in the caliphate. It says she defended her decision to buy Yazidi sex slaves in Syria, saying she was providing them shelter, quote unquote. She has 3 children with El-Hassani, and her eldest is from her previous marriage to a U.S. soldier. Her eldest son became the subject of ISIS propaganda videos, you can see there, in which he vowed revenge on U.S. President Donald Trump. It says here, the interview from prison with CNN spoke of her life in the caliphate as a prisoner, quote unquote, and said her husband once took her to a Yazidi slave market after suggesting they could help her and the children keep them company while he was off fighting. It also says over time, she said the couple bought 2 female teenage slaves and a young boy. The first slave was a girl named Saad, now aged 17, who Al-Hassani said she paid $10,000 for. Al-Hassani said her husband repeatedly raped the 2 girls, but she defended her decision to purchase them because she offered them protection. And every house that she was in before that was the same situation, but she did not have the support of someone like me, Al-Hassani told CNN. I would never apologize for bringing those girls to my house. They had me and I had them. Another situation, they would be locked in a bedroom and fed tea every day. We cooked together, we cleaned together, drank coffee together, slept in the same room together. I was like their mother. Saad sent CNN a video message from an Iraqi refugee camp confirming that El-Hassani rescued her. She said her children also became victims, especially her son Matthew, who became the subject of the ISIS propaganda video, which I just mentioned. But of course, there's always new stories coming out about ISIS, even though, of course, like I said, they have lost much territory since it all began. I have here from The Guardian, ISIS trying to foment a wave of migration to Europe, says UN official. Fighters fleeing Syria conspiring with local extremists to exploit food crisis in Africa's Sahel region. It says here, Islamic State commanders fleeing Syria are conspiring with extremist groups in Africa to foment and infiltrate a new migration wave destined for Europe, the head of the UN World Food Program has said. David Beasley, a former Republican governor of South Carolina, said Europe needed to wake up to the extremist strategy in the Sahel region. Not just, I wouldn't say just that region, but the entire region. Those forced out of Syria were uniting with local terrorist groups to use a lack of food as both a recruitment tool and a vehicle to push millions of Africans towards Europe, he said. Speaking to The Guardian during a visit to Brussels for a 2-day Syria summit, Beasley said, "You are going to face a similar pattern of what took place years ago, except you are going to have more ISIS and extremist groups infiltrating migration." What we are picking up is that they are partnering with the extremist groups like Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda to divvy up territory and resources to continue to infiltrate and destabilize in the hope of creating migration into Europe where they can infiltrate and cause chaos. And that it shouldn't be can, I mean, because they already have. I've showed you many videos here before of chaos being brought about and what's happening over there. But people aren't paying attention to this. And people need to know what is happening in Europe, what's happening in other countries that people think is just the best places in the world to live. I have here from Gatestone Institute, Belgium, first Islamic State in Europe? That's the question it's asking. It says the leaders of Belgium's Islam Party apparently want to turn Belgium into an Islamic State. They call it, quote, Islamist democracy, and have set a target date for the year 2030. The program is confusingly simple. Replace all the civil and penal codes with Sharia law, period. French magazine Cassor, the European capital Brussels will be Muslim in 20 years, said another magazine as well. The French acronym of Belgium's Islam Party stands for Integrity, Solidarity, Liberty, Authenticity, and Morality. The leaders of the Islam Party apparently want to turn Belgium into an Islamic State. They call it Islamic democracy. The French weekly magazine Le Point details the plans of the Islam Party. It would like to, quote, prevent vice by banning gaming establishments, casinos, gaming halls, and betting agencies, and the lottery, along with authorizing the wearing of the Muslim headscarf at school and an agreement about the Islamic religious holidays. The party wants all schools in Belgium to offer halal meat and on their school menus. One of the party's three founders also proposed segregating men and women on public transportation, and also Ahouch belonged to the 1990s to the Belgium Islamic Center, a nest of Islamic fundamentalism where candidates for jihad in Afghanistan and Iraq were recruited. The Islam Party knows that demography is on its side. Ahouch says in 12 years, quote unquote, Brussels will principally be composed of Muslims. In the upcoming Belgium elections, the Islam Party is now set to run candidates in 28 municipalities. On the first glance, that looks like derisory proportion compared to 589 Belgium municipalities, but it demonstrates the progress and ambitions of this new party. In Brussels, the party will be represented on 14 lists out of a possible 19. That is most likely why the Socialist Party now fears the rise of the Islam Party. In 2012, the party succeeded when running in just 3 Brussels districts and obtaining an elected representative in 2 of them, and failing only narrowly in Brussels City. 2 years later, in 2014 parliamentary elections, the Islam Party tried to expand its base into 2 constituencies, Brussels City and Lague. Once again, the results were impressive for a party that favors the introduction of Sharia, Islamic law, into Belgium. In Brussels, they won 9,421 votes. So, of course, this is the future for many countries in Europe if they don't wake up very quickly and start coming up with a plan of what they're going to do as they import millions of people, importing a worldview, importing a huge financial bill to take care of people, and of course, changing even the political voting atmosphere. Because who are all these people going to vote for? The people who continue to offer them the most free stuff. And we see the political Islamists, like I said before, working behind the scenes just as hard, if not harder, than the jihadists. But of course, with a different method of operation, seem peaceful, quote unquote, at least in the Western sense of what the word peaceful means, compared to the jihadists who are out there fighting outwardly with people. Now here from the Christian Post, it says Turkey complains about Islamophobia in Europe and persecutes its own Christian community at the same time. Today, approximately 215 million Christians experience persecution, meaning that 1 in 12 Christians live where Christianity is illegal, forbidden, or punished, and Islamic extremism remains the global dominant driver of persecution, responsible for initiating oppression and conflict, according to the Christian watchdog group Open Doors. And yet Turkey, Minister of Foreign Affairs Mevlut Cavusoglu, recently criticized the European public, politicians, and media for engaging in, quote, extremist, anti-immigrant, xenophobic, and Islamophobic rhetoric of hate against Muslims, believe it or not. And his 2017 report on human rights violations, Turkey's Association of Protestant Churches details Turkey's systematic discrimination against its Protestant community, listing the hate crimes as well as verbal and physical attacks against Protestant Christians. The Turkish government doesn't even recognize the Protestant community as a legal entity, quote unquote, denying them the right to freely establish and maintain places of worship. Since their meeting places are not officially recognized as places of worship, they're often targeted and closed. Of course, no surprise here whatsoever. I have here from Jews News, Islamic Turkey seizes 50 Christian churches and properties as their open war against infidels intensifies. Yes, and of course, a war against infidels has been going on for a long time. Many people living today, of course, don't even think about the Armenian genocide, which happened just around 100 years ago. And of course, Erdogan is continuing on this history of persecuting Christians, of persecuting people who will not deny the truth of the Lord Jesus Christ and who he is and what he's done on our behalf, and how his death and resurrection is the power of God unto salvation. And that's why this good news needs to continue to be spread. And who is someone who is spreading this good news? A man who I've talked about, it seems like almost every single week over the last couple of months, if not longer, and that is Pastor Brunson, who is still in prison in Turkey. I have here from WND, Congress set to sanction Turkey over jailed U.S. pastor. Yes, finally some moving ahead news here from a higher level. Congress is prepared to sanction Turkey if the NATO ally does not release an American missionary jailed since October 2016 on what Washington contends are trumped-up charges. Now, it's great to hear this because, as I've mentioned Pastor Brunson many times before, just being a Christian missionary, and then all of a sudden, being arrested, being put in prison, all the weight that he's lost and everything else, no surprise. I'll go ahead and keep this picture here. I have from a couple other sources too. Reuters, 66 U.S. senators signed a letter calling on Turkey to release jailed pastor. Again, good news there. Also have from Alvian News, the U.S. issues 3 warnings to Turkey in 2 days about this situation as well. Again, more good news for him. And what did I say last week? And even before that, I've mentioned here before the situation here. And Pastor Brunson could come home today, yesterday, last month. And here is the deal that Turkey wants. I have here from World Watch Monitor, Erdogan demands Gulen extradition for U.S. pastor's release. I mentioned this again last week. As I said, this falling away between Erdogan and Fethullah Gulen, who now lives in Pennsylvania, who is the head of the largest Islamic charter school system in the United States, had a falling away about 5 years ago. And there are still a ton of people in Turkey who like Gulen. And that's why Erdogan has been putting people in jail. As matter if they're civilians, if they're military, if they're police, if they are a Gulen sympathizer, he doesn't like them and he will jail them. And he has said right here once again, United States, if you give me Gulen, I will give you Pastor Brunson. But like I said, a person has to commit a crime that is recognized as a crime in both countries, the United States and Turkey, in order for the United States to extradite a criminal, quote unquote. Unless Turkey can say this is what Gulen is doing in the U.S. that is illegal according to the U.S., they're not going to send him off to Erdogan. Now, it's important for people to know at the same time that Gulen and this Gulenist movement is a cultic type movement. There's actually a book about Gulen and the Gulenist movement and this cult, quote unquote, because of the different things that they do. And also, people don't realize either that this Gulen movement is very similar to the Muslim Brotherhood, but a Turkish version of that, a Turkish version, quote unquote, of the Muslim Brotherhood and what they're doing in the United States. Erdogan and Gulen both want to be top dog. Of course, Gulen is in the U.S., Erdogan's still in Turkey, of course, and he wants Gulen. He will give us Pastor Brunson if we give him Gulen. So is the United States going to give him Gulen? We'll have to see. It's very, very important for people to know the details about this story, though. So think about that when we take a short break. We'll be back here with more Islam in the news in just a couple of minutes. Please stay right where you are. Friends, welcome back to Islam and the News, talking about the persecution of Pastor Brunson right before the break. And of course, no surprise, like I said, it's very sad. Every single week I have to actually pick and choose what persecution stories to talk about. I could easily do a 1-hour show just on persecution alone. Speaking of that, I have here this is from Christian Post, number 13 here. Islamic extremism remains top driver in persecution of Christians across the globe. While the Islamic State has largely been driven out of Iraq and Syria, various Islamic extremist groups remain the largest persecutors of Christians around the world, according to a new report from Open Doors USA. The Christian organization recently released a list highlighting some of the greatest human rights offenders towards Christians, noting that 215 million believers face intimidation, prison, even death for their faith in Jesus Christ across the globe. Islamic oppression, quote unquote, was overwhelmingly identified as the top driver of Christian persecution, with the majority of the groups identified by Open Doors falling under the umbrella of Islamic extremism. Islamic oppression is one of the most widely recognized sources of persecution for Christians in the world today, and it continues to spread, aiming to bring many parts of the world under Sharia law, says Open Doors. The movement, which often results in Islamic militancy and persecution of Christians, is expanding in Asia, including the Philippines, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, and Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, and Somalia. And of course, this is what you continue to hear here on Islam in the News every single week. I have here from World Watch Monitor, Pakistani Christian dies after being set on fire by Muslim in alleged dispute over who should convert. A Christian woman from northeastern Pakistan has died from her injuries after being set on fire by a Muslim man who claims it was an accident, and followed a discussion about which of them should convert if they were to marry. Asma Yaqub, 24, died in a Lahore hospital on April 22nd after suffering 80% burns during an incident at her employer's house at 11 p.m. on April 17th. She had been transferred from her local hospital in Salkot, 120 kilometers north of Lahore, because of the extent of her injuries. Also out of Pakistan, a family of a Christian boy killed by police, compensated in rare victory, quote unquote, is what it says here. The family of a Christian boy who was killed while in police custody has been compensated for more than the standard amount paid out in similar cases. A lawyer working for the family called the outcome a rare victory, quote unquote. Arsalan Masih, a 16-year-old student from in the northeastern Punjab province, died after a brutal assault by policemen on the 9th of October last year. His 6 alleged assailants, Mohammed Imtiaz, Muhammad Rashid, Muhammad Arshad, Muhammad Tanvir, and here's someone, oh no, there's a Muhammad here too, Robin Masih and Muhammad Iqbal, offered the family 3 million rupees, and this is $26,000 United States wise, under the Islamic concept of diyat, blood money, as restitution in exchange for court pardons. They had each spent more than 4 months in prison. And of course, also a woman who has been talked about for years and is still in confinement. Also from World Watch Monitor, Pakistan's top judge says he'll hear Asia Bibi's appeal personally and soon. Pakistan's Chief Justice says he will decide soon the fate of Asiya Noreen, a Christian woman whose 2009 conviction on blasphemy charges has fixated world attention on the country's treatment of religious minorities. Chief Justice Saqib Nassar told Noreen's lawyer, Saf al-Muluk, on the 21st of April that he would hear the woman's appeal. Noreen, popularly known as Asia Bibi, has been in prison since 2009. He says, "Be ready, Saif al-Muluk. I'm going to fix your case soon, and I myself will preside over the bench," the Catholic news service UCAN reported Nassar as saying. So again, another woman to be praying for. She's been in prison for a long time. And I have here also from World Watch, Coptic teacher cleared of contempt of religion for questions about Muhammad. Yes, this is a news story I talked about just a few weeks ago. Here's the update. A Coptic teacher has been found not guilty of contempt of religion after he was charged last month for including word plays in a set of questions about Islam's prophet Muhammad. And of course, if you recall me talking about this, it was just a multiple choice question, multiple choice answer basically for the one question, multiple choice answer. Okay, which one is correct? And they punished him and started to persecute him because of the incorrect answers that he purposely put there, because the incorrect answers were insulting. It says here, during the hearing on April the 19th, both the headmaster of the school and local MP defended the teacher, Magdi Farag Samir, saying he has a, quote, good reputation and good manners, and that, quote, he did not mean to insult. Following the verdict, local Coptic priest Armia Abdu Babawi told World Watch Monitor, "We thank the Egyptian judiciary for not discriminating between citizens. This case has boosted cohesion and community peace." Moving on to the Christian Post, I mentioned this not too long ago as well. Dozens of Iranian Christian refugees sue Trump admin for denying asylum application. I had mentioned this group of Iranians saying, "Hey, why didn't they just say that they were Muslims and that they were seeking refuge? They would have just been let in right away and given, free houses, free cars, free Social Security if they're over 65 years old." But here, saying that you're a Christian and that you're from Iran, here a large group of Iranian refugees has been left in limbo in Austria for over a year, is suing the Trump administration after their applications for asylum in the United States under a special amendment designed to protect persecuted religious minorities were denied. The group of about 90, which consists of dozens of Assyrian and Armenian Christians and other religious minorities, filed a class action lawsuit last week against U.S. government officials in hopes that a judge will bar the administration from denying asylum to the Iranian refugees. Similar groups of refugees in the past have been admitted into the U.S. under the Lautenberg Amendment, which originally passed in 1989 to facilitate the resettlement of Jews from the former Soviet Union, but has since been expanded to apply to minorities facing persecution in Iran. So maybe this is one story that hasn't gotten the attention of people higher up yet. It'd be great if it did, because then hopefully these 90 people, what is this 90 people compared to the thousands upon thousands who've already showed up in the West? And of course, these here actually genuine Christians, whereas we see what's happening with a lot of the other refugee situations. Oh yeah, this 13-year-old kid lost his parents and he's a refugee, and then guess who shows up? Like a 35-year-old man, and people are like, this isn't what I agreed to here, but what's going to happen? They're going to send him back saying, oh, you lied on your application? So anyway, you know all the problems with this whole situation if you're a regular viewer here. I also have here from, this is actually syndicated news, Christians should not be second-class citizens, says a cardinal to Saudi Arabia. French Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran's trip, the first such trip by a senior Catholic figure, raised hopes of more openness in the kingdom, which is home to Islam's holiest sites but bans the practice of other faiths. It included a meeting with King Salman, his first with a Catholic official. It says here, quote, "I think all religions are faced with two dangers, terrorism and ignorance. Tehran, who is head of the Vatican's Council for Interreligious Dialogue, told the Vatican Radio, "During my meetings, I insisted very much on this point that Christians and non-Muslims are spoken of well in schools, and that they are never considered second-class citizens," he said. Now, of course, this is definitely the case, even with all these different reforms, quote unquote, that are taking place in Saudi Arabia. I may believe that there's actually true reform going on when all of a sudden Saudi Arabia says, hey, Christians, you're welcome to build a church here. Jews, you're welcome to build a synagogue here. And that would be a major step in reformation in the Saudi kingdom. All these other things that we're hearing about in the West, of, like women can drive now, and of course all the other rules that were still with that didn't come out. And, people can watch movies in movie theaters now. We're having a rock concert here for the first time ever, a female performer. This is very, very minimal reform type stuff. We need to see some more major stuff go on before we say, hey, look at the reformation of Saudi Arabia. Now, of course, reformation can go two ways. Are we going to reform back, like a regressive reformation to Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and Ibn Taymiyyah and the early followers of Muhammad and Muhammad himself? Or is there going to be a progressive reformation of meaning freedom and de-religiousizing a bit and all of that? That's why I always have to ask people, what do you mean by that? Even when they say reformation, you mean backwards or do you mean forward? Because both can happen. Now, I have here from World Watch Monitor, giving freedom to women is something remarkable. Egypt's Protestant head says, changes related to women are the most critical changes in any culture and any country, says Reverend Dr. Andrea Zaki, head of Egypt's fastest growing Protestant community. You can easily give men freedom, but giving freedom to women is something remarkable. Zaki welcomes what he calls the, quote, major and radical reforms ushered by the Saudi heir apparent Mohammed bin Salman, such as permitting women to drive, and he says believes that they will influence the whole of the Middle East. The Protestant leader says he believes in ordaining women, even though many in his constituency may not, and that he is a firm believer in equipping women to stand as equals alongside men in culture that routinely puts them second. Now, of course, one more place, a place that many people would not think of needing reformation, would be Australia. I have here from Daily Mail, change your Western mentality or I'll get another wife. Australian Muslim women are being trapped in abusive relationships as Sharia imams refuse to divorce them from their husbands. As it says here, a Muslim woman has told the ABC Islamic imams refused to grant her a divorce. This was despite her supplying them in Melbourne with tape of abusive husband. Religious leaders had dismissed her concerns under parallel Sharia law system. Now, of course, Australia, the Islamization of Australia, another show that we definitely need to do here on ABN's Trinity channel, is something that many people are not aware of either. I mean, people are not aware of what's happening in Europe. People are not aware of what's happening in Australia. And this is the case everywhere where you have a growing population, which just, if you look to Islamic history, a growing number demanding more stuff, becoming more aggressive, claiming oppression more and more and more, even for the smallest things. This is the pattern that we see. This is what people need to be aware of. And of course, if you look to Europe, we're many steps ahead. I have here from Jews News, Islamic London mayor wants to ban free speech on social media because Muslims are offended. Man, the First Amendment, it protects offensive speech. That's what it's all about. Because guess what? Nobody complains when you say, hey, nice shirt. Hey, nice outfit. Nobody complains when you see something that they like or agree with. Offensive speech is the exact kind of speech that needs to be protected and defended. The thing is that, hey, if you talk to people in Europe, they'll say, hey, there is no freedom of speech here. I mean, there's this watered down version of it, but it's not like the United States. And of course, free speech being attacked here in the United States as well. It says here, we agree people should not use crude language in social media, but our advice for the mayor of London is to delete his accounts on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Sadiq Khan is the first Muslim mayor of London. He is not the first mayor to be attacked on social media by trolls, but he is the first politician in the world who wants to ban speech freedom because someone said something not nice about him on Twitter. Liberals and leftists in the West use the made-up term Islamophobia, quote-unquote, to portray anyone who criticizes Islam as a racist. Radical Muslim terrorists all over the world carry out terror attacks in the name of Allah. They justify their violence by quoting verses from the Quran. Islamophobia is a made-up word created by the Muslim Brotherhood specifically to silence debate, and liberals and leftists ignore the fact that Islam is an ideology that has nothing to do with race. So, very important thing for people to be aware of here. Of course, I've talked about Islamophobia and all of these tactics of the political Islamists on my video called The Muslim Brotherhood, Origin, Identity, and Agenda. 53-minute video, I believe, a presentation, very high quality visuals in that. Just go to vimeo.com/Tony Relay and you'll find that as well as many other videos there as well. But people here in the West, many politicians who have not done their homework are falling for this Muslim Brotherhood tactic. And this man here is one of them. And this man's name is Christopher Murphy. Yes, Senator Christopher Murphy, Democrat out of some eastern state here. I don't see it here. Let's see what it says here. In the middle of his diatribe against the appointment of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and that's some news that just happened this last week as well. Yes, Mike Pompeo becoming official Secretary of State now. It says here, Senator Christopher Murphy, likely reading from the talking points of American Islamist separatist organizations, took it upon himself to declare Muslims affiliated with the AIFD as anti-Muslim. We at the AIFD demand an immediate apology from the senator, and we hope that he realizes that similar statements from governments in the Middle East would be death threats. Now, check out this video here.
Mike Pompeo was deeply intertwined with this network of anti-Muslim organizations. A really interesting study that I hope some of you will take a look at that details this network of organizations. They have fairly innocuous sounding names like the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, the Middle East Forum, the Investigative Project on Terrorism, Jihad Watch, Act for America, the Center for Security Policy, the Society of Americans for National Excellence. Those sound like things that I might be for, but if you really take a look at what they do, they preach intolerance.
They preach intolerance is what he claims, and yet I'm sure he would line right up and support CARE, which sounds real good, the Council on American Islamic Relations, who, guess what, is Hamas in America. Hamas being the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. So Senator Christopher Murphy here needs to buy himself a huge stack of primary sources and start reading so he can learn about this tactic that is being used by the political Islamists in the West, and he sounds like one of them, and there's a problem there. Of course, the problem is that he hasn't done his homework, and it's no surprise to hear ignorance coming from people who haven't studied Islam for themselves. They just listen to their American Constitution-loving, Bill of Rights-loving American Muslim neighbor, coworker, classmate, etc., who many times hasn't even read the primary sources either. So there's this claim that believing that jihad usually refers to outward fighting makes you an Islamophobe. So if that's the case, then we need to look at the Islamophobes' top 10 list. This is from Dio Valente. It says here, these are the people who are going to show up. If believing that jihad is actually outward fighting makes you an Islamophobe, let's go ahead and look at the top 10. Number 10 on the list, Sheikh al-Misri. This Islamophobe was born in the 14th century and is famous for being the writer of the best-known classical manual on Sunni Islamic jurisprudence from the perspective of the Shafi'i school of thought. This quote was taken from that book, which can be found on Amazon and other online bookstores. So get on your laptops and get those fear-mongering books banned. You can read the quote there for yourself, and of course you can watch this back to read these quotes as well. Number 9 on the list, Sheikh Ibn Qadoma. This famous Arabic Islamophobe lived in the days of Islamic tolerance found in the 13th century. He is still revered in Sunnism as one of the most influential thinkers and jurists from the Hanbali school of thought, where he is to this day referred to as the Sheikh of Islam. His books are mainly available in Arabic, but hey, better safe than sorry. Buy him and burn him, freedom fighters. That's what it says here, at least. Number 8 on the list, Sheikh al-Nawawi. It says, this 13th century scholar of Islam who lived in Damascus for most of his life is famous for writing many lengthy books on Islamic jurisprudence during the classical period of the religion. He is still considered one of the most influential writers within the Shafi'i school of thought. This guy's books are all over the place. Get them out of the public realm by buying one or get them banned. Number 7 on the list, Abu Hanifa. Yes, we have here the mainstream school of thought called Hanafi bears this Islamophobe's name. His words, written down by his students in the early 8th century, are crucial to the mentioned madhab and have been tremendously influential for almost all of Islam's existence. To this very day, one of his titles in mainstream Islam is the Great Imam, quote unquote. Muslims have cared for his texts in order to preserve as much as possible, since he was one of the greatest scholars of Islam during the formative period. Moving to number 6 on the list, who's the number 6 Islamophobe? That would be Al-Qurtubi, commenting on Surah 2, verse 193, fight them until there is no more fitna, and the deen, or religion, belongs to Allah alone. This famous Islamophobic scholar walked the earth during Islam's golden age, quote unquote. Al-Qurtubi first lived in Muslim-invaded Spain after moving to today's Egypt when the Spaniards dared to recapture their land. He is best known for his influential commentary on the entire Quran, though he was also an expert in Islamic law. Want to get a hold of his work? Try any major store. Moving to number 5, Ibn Rushd. This Islamophobe is well known in the West by the name Averroes. Besides a philosopher, he was a highly trained Maliki jurist, which is another mainstream Islamic school of thought. He wrote a book comparing the opinions of the 4 main schools of thought in Sunni Islam, which is still considered great study material for the student of Islamic jurisprudence. His works are available all over the world, so they should be easy to trace. Number 4, Islamophobe on the top 10, we have al-Mawardi. This obvious Islamophobe from the 11th century is considered a heavyweight on legal issues, particularly concerning the Caliphate of Islam. His book on Islamic governance was very influential to mainstream Islam, especially during his time, and according to some, he should be known as the first Islamic political scientist because of his detailed focus upon the empire-mindedness, which particularly strong during these times of Islamic strength. Moving to number 3, the third Islamophobe, the biggest Islamophobe out of the top 10, we have Sheikh Ibn Kathir. Yes, commenting on Surah 9, verse 29 of the Quran. This Islamophobia is strong with this one. Ibn Kathir has always been considered one of the best commentators on the Quran. His exegesis is so clear and wise, according to the Muslim tradition, that a student of the Quran would be strongly advised to become familiar with his tafsir, as a commentary on the Quran. It is no surprise that his translated work can be found everywhere. You know what to do. Number two on the top 10 Islamophobe list, we have Umar ibn al-Khattab. This Islamophobe was a personal friend of Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, and became the second successor of his master as the Caliph of the Islamic community in the 7th century. When he spoke the words in this narration, he was referring to the first successor and father-in-law of Muhammad, called Abu Bakr. He fought a war against the people who had apparently become hypocrites, fake Muslims, by refusing to pay the Islamic alms, zakat, to him. The source for this quote is an authentic source, according to all Sunni Muslim scholars, the hadith collection called Sahih Muslim. And drum roll please, number 1 on the top 10 Islamophobe list is, guess who? Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam. It says here, This Islamophobe who dares to claim that the best jihad is the one whereby a man sheds his blood and wounds his horse in battle happens to be the founder of Islam. The narration in which his statement is found is of a higher classification of authenticity than the famous hadith where he is recorded to have suggested that warfare is the lesser jihad. If you want to find hundreds of more clear Islamophobic statements where Muhammad talks about offensive warfare, dig through the sources and you'll find him saying things like, "I have been ordered to fight with the people till they say none has the right to be worshipped but Allah. And whoever says none has the right to be worshipped but Allah, his life and property will be saved by me, except for Islamic law, and his accounts will be with Allah." This Muhammad person, who does not have a PhD in anything, has also said this: "A single endeavor of fighting in Allah's cause is the forenoon, in the forenoon or in the afternoon, is better than the world and whatever is in it." Yes, he went on another Islamophobic rant saying the person who participates in holy battles in Allah's cause and nothing compels him to do so except belief in Allah and his apostles will be recompensed by Allah either with a reward or booty if he survives, or will be admitted to paradise if he is killed in the battle as a martyr. Had I not found it difficult for my followers, then I would not remain behind any Sariya going for jihad, and I would have loved to be martyred in Allah's cause and then made alive and then martyred and then made alive and then again martyred in his cause. These are the top 10 Islamophobes. If you want to call an Islamophobe someone who believed that jihad usually refers to outward fighting. And we're still seeing that today. It's not just in the primary sources of Islam, something that happened back then, which is not the case when it comes to the whole Old Testament violence. A whole different context here. And please point to some Christians in the world today who are still fighting the Amalekites, okay? You're not going to be able to do it. But where can you point to in the world today where Muslims are still fighting the infidels? Yeah, this is still happening. And this is a command that we find in the primary sources of Islam. Now, CAIR and the political Islamists who want to claim, oh, if you think jihad is usually referring to outward fighting, then you're an Islamophobe, well, they need to condemn their own primary sources, because that is where you'll find the biggest Islamophobes of all, if this is the case, and that's how you define jihad and what you want to call people if they define jihad that way, because Muhammad, his early successors, and everybody else who devoutly followed him believed the same way. And that is why you need to continue to share the gospel with the Muslims around you, and at the same time, continue to get informed about Islam. And again, Islam according to Muhammad, not your average nominal Muslim living today who doesn't even read the primary sources, let alone follow them. They need the gospel at the same time, though. So share the gospel with the Muslims around you, share the gospel with the non-Muslims around you, get people educated by sharing these videos. Continue to pray and support for ABN's Trinity channel and Islam in the News, coming to you every single Friday with the news stories that you will not get in the mainstream media, your Islamic news source. Tell people about it, and we'll see you next Friday here on ABN's Trinity channel for another episode of Islam and the News.